Were you asked to do anything else on the 7th, Sergeant?
I believe I was also. At some point, apparently the command post received word that some searchers had located an area that it looked suspicious. There was plastic poking up from the ground, and it looked like the ground had been disturbed. So I was asked to go to that area along with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, Sergeant Tyson and Lieutenant Link, and help the crime lab if they requested it to excavate that area.
Do you know on what roadway this was?
I believe it was off Kuss White Cedar Road.
All right. This is something that Mr. Ertl yesterday talked about, a potential burial site, but wasn't. Was that your understanding? It turned out not to be?
Yes, it turned out to be nothing.
All right. Did you do anything else on the 7th?
I think by the time we were done with that, that consumed the rest of the day.
Welcome everyone to a Reading with the Crew special presentation. My name is Dr. Silkman and I am from the Foul Play team. Today's presentation is entitled The Ghost at the Kuss Road Cul-de-sac. I hope that you enjoy the presentation. All the opinions expressed in this presentation are my own. What was found at the Kuss Road Cul-de-sac on November the 7th, 2005? Let us start off with the formation of Search Team A. 11:07:05 at 800 hours. I, Deputy Siders, along with Sergeant Senglob, Sergeant Jason Jost, and Deputy M. Bushman, responded to 12:09:30 Avery Road, Two Rivers, which is Avery Auto Salvage, to assist the CASO with searching the property and the surrounding area. Once on the scene, the OIC of the CASO did break up search groups. The search groups included the MTSO, the CASO, and volunteer firefighters. The group which I was put in was Group A, and the team leader was Deputy M. Bushman. Also in the group were officers from the CASO and volunteer firefighters from surrounding FDs. The property which we were to search was a wooded area on White Cedar Road, west of Avery's Auto Salvage, in addition to the property north of Stephen Avery's residence. Stephen Avery's burn pit had not been examined. The burnt electronics in Stephen Avery's burn barrel had not been discovered. The key, license plates, and the cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit had not been discovered. Who was Deputy M. Bushman? Here is a photograph that was taken in 1984 showing Officer Mike Bushman, who was a Canine officer, and he's photographed here with Sheriff Tom Kacerik. Both of them had worked for the MTSO. On July 14th, 1985, he was called out with his canine, Duke, to track Gregory Allen for an attempted sexual assault. Mike Bushman had arrested Stephen Avery on July 29, 1985, for the vicious assault of Penny Bernston. Stephen Avery was exonerated for this crime in 2003. On November the 7th, 2005, Mike Bushman was called out of retirement to assist in the investigation for the search of Teresa Horbach. He was made team leader of Search Team A. He had found or was informed about a possible excavation site at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Mike Bushman did not write up a report on his search activities that day. He was not called up to testify in either trial. He had reported for active duty for just one day. We do, however, have this incident group time log of Mike Bushman. First of all, let's have a look at Mike Bushman when he clocked in and when he clocked out. He clocked in at 7:38 in the morning. He did not clock out. He clocked back in at 12:50 p.m. with no clocking out. He clocked back in at 4:14 p.m. and he clocked out at 4:45 p.m. and again he clocked out at 5:33 p.m. with no clock in. On this form there is some scribbled information written on it. 1. Found burial site. 2. Found stump, RORI and TCO. On the back of this form we have the following information: camera, cell phone, purse, clothing, unearthed, rolled ground, dirt, disturbed, license plate SWH 582, tracks, vehicle 5 to 10 foot apart. Then we have the entry for 1206. Siders found remains of cell phone under a tyre rim burned in a barrel, and Siders was a member of Search Team A. It was very likely that the searchers were looking for these particular items that had belonged to Teresa Horbach. At approximately 10:33 a.m. that morning, Mike Bushman had made a call.
752 to 496. Todd, we're almost at the end of Kuss Road. Should be a squad down there. I don't know who's sitting in it, but bring an investigator down here. We got some items that should be cleared. Copied. 496, you may want a shovel. 10-4. We copied. We'll make arrangements here.
Here are the salient points. Mike Bushman had mentioned the following: almost at the end of Kuss Road, squad down there, don't know who is sitting in it, bring an investigator down here, some items that should be cleared, you may want a shovel. So what was CASO's response to Mike Bushman's request at Kuss Road? I quote, on Monday, 11:07:05 at 10:35 hours, I, Diedering, was contacted by investigator Wiegert. He requested that an investigator go to the east end of Kuss Road. I did respond to the area and spoke with retired Deputy Inspector Michael Bushman, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Bushman was leading a team of searchers in the area. It should be noted that the end of Kuss Road is approximately 1/2 mile away from the western edge of the Avery property. I arrived at the east end of Kuss Road at approximately 10:45 hours and spoke with former Deputy Inspector Bushman. He indicated he had found a possible excavation site and did take us to the site. The area was then taped off with crime scene tape and the area was frozen. No one was allowed in or out. The possible excavation area was processed by Wisconsin State Crime Lab personnel, and at 16:51 hours, I was notified the excavation area was not pertinent to this case. GPS coordinates for this area were as follows. I quote, upon reporting to the crime scene on Monday, 11:07:05, I, Sergeant Tyson, was informed that my duty for the morning would be to work with Lieutenant Lenk and Sergeant Andrew Colburn. I was informed they did wish for us to open the trunks on all remaining vehicles on the property, and after that was completed, enter all the residences and collect all firearms. As we finished collecting the firearms from the master bedroom, I received a phone call indicating we were needed to leave Barb Yunder's residence and respond to Kuss Road for a suspicious incident. Lieutenant Lenk, Sergeant Colborne, and I left Barb Yunder's residence at 10:58 hours. After clearing from the suspicious incident, we did go back to Barbara Yunder's residence to finish collecting firearms from the residence. At 14:50 hours, Sergeant Colborne, Lieutenant Lenk, and I enter Barbara Yunder's residence. Additional firearms collected from the residence include: our search for firearms had ended and we exited Barbara Yunder's residence at 15:08 hours. After clearing from Barbara Yunder's residence, we were notified the Wisconsin State Crime Lab was on scene on Kuss Road, and we were requested to come back to the area to assist the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Upon our arrival, the potential area of suspicion had been blocked off by crime scene tape, and I did check in with Investigator Diedring. I notified him that Sergeant Colburn, Lieutenant Lenk, and I would be entering the crime scene area to assist the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. It shall be noted, this was an area that was discovered earlier in the day by search volunteers who had located an area approximately 3 feet by 3 feet that appeared to be disturbed soil. After the photography by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab was completed, Lieutenant Lenk, Sergeant Colburn, and I began digging up the area and quickly found out this was not a possible grave or burial site. Upon reporting those findings to Investigator Diedring, the crime scene tape had been removed and the area was reopened. The question is, why was Tyson, Lenk, and Colburn called back to the Kuss Road cul-de-sac? We had discovered that the area of the disturbed earth was approximately 3 feet by 3 feet, and here you can see a scale diagram of a 3 foot by 3 foot area in comparison to a person who is 6 foot tall. And the key question here, of course, is how many trained law enforcement officers are required to either rule in or rule out a small piece of dirt as being pertinent to the case? So let us sum up what we know so far. We know that a disturbed earth is found, and in actual fact it was found on private property. It's likely that Deputy Mike Bushman had informed Investigator Uyghur, and at 10:35 a.m. he had phoned up Investigator Diedring, and Investigator Diedring at 10:45 a.m. went to speak with Mike Bushman. Mike Bushman then showed him the excavation site that was only 3 foot by 3 foot. In the meantime, Tyson, Lenk, and Colburn at 10:58 a.m. go to Kuss Road. They then return from Kuss Road at approximately 2:50 p.m. to go back to the Yunder residence. Tyson, Lenk, and Colburn return back to Kuss Road at approximately 3:08 p.m. and they are there to assist the Wisconsin State Crime Lab in digging up the disturbed earth. The Wisconsin State Crime Lab roll up, and this time it is just Ertl and Zhang, and photographs are taken of the excavation site. Diedring is then informed that at 4:51 p.m. he deems that the excavation site was not pertinent to this case. All in all, approximately 6 hours have been spent at a 3 foot by 3 foot piece of disturbed dirt. Ground photography of the Kuss Road cul-de-sac was taken by Trooper Reese commencing at 8:30 in the morning, and Trooper Reese had taken 48 photographs of the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Some of the most striking photographs were aerial photography of the Kuss Road cul-de-sac, and these were taken by Trooper McConnell. He took 155 photographs in 60 minutes in the late afternoon between 3:50 p.m. and 4:50 p.m. If we have a look at this photograph here, we can see that the traffic was blocked at both ends of Kuss Road. We can also see that there were multiple vehicles and people at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. It was discovered that the actual excavation site was on private property. We can actually see the location of the excavation site. We also can note that there is extensive use of crime scene tape. There is no doubt that the Kuss Road cul-de-sac was treated very much as a crime scene. This photograph here illustrates some very important points. We can actually see Fausk with her bloodhound Loof. We can see some tower floodlights that were later on used at the suspect burial site. We can see that there was 3D mapping equipment, and we can see the Wisconsin State Crime Lab truck. Further up, there was the equipment truck that dropped off the tower floodlights. We can also see quite a few people standing around at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac on the other side of the crime scene tape. Here we can see the use of 2 floodlights that were brought to the suspected burial sites, and we can see that the 3 remaining floodlights were on the other side of the crime scene tape, and it looks like there was a fire truck that was also at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. And here we can see the suspect burial site being illuminated by the floodlights. Now, remember that on November the 8th, no floodlights were used at Stephen Avery's burn pit, and clearly we can see that they were available. We can see the suspect burial site. We can see what appears to be dark soil, what appears to be a white plastic sheet, and next to it there is a large blue tarp. And here are some close-up pictures of the suspect burial site. I have not been able to find or locate any close-up photographs of the suspect burial site that has been dug up. Was this the area of the disturbed earth? If you look closely at the photographs, you can see a small patch of dirt on the ground that's relatively devoid of leaves and other plant-like material. It begs the question though, why would any searcher pay any attention to this specific area of dirt in a forested area? I have drawn a red square around this particular area, and the question is, was this the area of the disturbed earth? Remember what Deputy Mike Bushman had requested, and that was to bring a shovel. I do not know if this is a true in situ photograph, whether material was present and found at this particular area and was subsequently removed. Here we can see the location of the Kuss Road cul-de-sac in reference to Stephen Avery's trailer. Both locations were separated by a cornfield, and the distance was around about 805 metres. We can also see the location of Redon's deer camp. Why were members of Search Team A at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac in the very first place? Who directed them there? On August the 10th, 2006, there was a partial motion hearing, and Investigator Fassbender had made a very interesting comment. I quote, "We had that clandestine site. We had reports of some bones found on some property west of this area that Mark and I actually went out on because there was no one available. technicians available that we checked that. And the whole purpose of this motion was that the state had complained about a lack of resources. The Kuss Road cul-de-sac was west of the Avery salvage yard. And what reports was Tom Fassbender talking about, and who had found those bones? Was it Mike Bushman or members of Search Team A? There is no question that investigator Tom Fassbender, you could see him here in his red-black jacket, was at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. According to Fassbender, Wiegert was also at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Neither Fassbender nor Wiegert showed up at Stephen Avery's burn pit on November the 8th, yet both investigators were at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Why would both investigators be at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac examining some disturbed earth that was 3 foot by 3 foot? On September the 14th, 2006, the following motion was presented. I quote, "State's response to defendant's motion to suppress fruits of the November 5 search warrant based on a multiple execution argument." This document was submitted by Special Prosecutor Kratz and Assistant Attorney General and Special Prosecutor Fallon. Both would be fully aware of the forensic evidence that was found, including the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. And I quote from that document, "It is unreasonable to expect that the law enforcement officers complete their search within 1 or 2 days, given the fact that resources were strained and that every time something was discovered off-site, personnel were assigned to investigate. For example, S.A. Fassbender described finding a clandestine burial site located away from the Avery salvage yard. Additionally, a discovery at Maribel Caves Park of women's pants and lotion caused the relocation of resources to that location. Additionally, a cell phone was found in a ditch, as well as some possible human bones elsewhere. These were in addition to the ones found at the clandestine burial site. As a result, evidence technicians were utilized and taken away from the parcel. This reflects both the scope of the law enforcement effort and the corresponding strain on resources, making it impossible to complete the search any sooner than they did. Were bones found at the clandestine burial site? And was the elsewhere a reference to the Manitowoc County gravel pit? Again, it cannot be overstated that resources were also being utilized in Marinette County to interview members of the Avery family, including the defendant. Law enforcement officers were involved in the transportation of evidence to the crime lab. They were used to assist in searching areas outside the 40-acre parcel of the search warrant scene. All these initial efforts were focused on finding Teresa Horbach. Only with the discovery of human bones on Tuesday afternoon in the burn pit did it become apparent that Teresa Horbach was probably dead, her body dismembered, and her remains were actually on the Avery property. This discovery enabled law enforcement to refocus and concentrate all efforts on executing the search for the Avery property. Until it became clear that Teresa Horbach was dead, these parallel efforts to locate her in other areas of the county were required. These officers could not simply ignore these additional leads. It begs the question, what were the additional leads? And remember that one day after the Kuss Road incident, remains were found in Stephen's burn pit. It's interesting that both Kratz and Fallon forgot to mention that even after cremains were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, the investigators were finding cremains in other locations that were off the Avery salvage yard, for example, in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Mr. Kratz also wrote something that was quite perplexing in his book. I quote, "In MAM 2, the filmmakers make much of tracks identified by live scent and cadaver dogs during the days following discovery of Hallbark's SUV. The fact that the dogs alerted to areas in the quarry, near Kuss Road, adjacent to the salvage yard, is emphasised as if it points culpability away from Avery. The show entirely omits to mention that the dogs first alerted and picked up Teresa's scent at Avery's trailer, followed the scent from Stephen Avery's doorstep to Teresa's SUV, and alerted in areas along the way as a result of Stephen driving her SUV around the salvage yard. More shockingly, the fact that the dogs found Teresa's scent is offered as proof that bones found near Kuss Road must be hers. Forget that no expert from the state, the FBI, or the defense could conclusively say those scattered bones were human, much less those of Teresa Hallbark. Were bones, cremains, recovered at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac, the so-called burial site? The bones, cremains that were discovered at the Manitowoc County gravel pit are nowhere near Kuss Road. So what was Mr. Kratz referring to? Now we're going to look at some testimony of individuals that were at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. What did John Ertl do at the potential burial site? And he was questioned by Fallon. Question: all right, now was that task at all interrupted on Monday? Yes, just after we had our lunch break and we had just started sifting the barrels again, around 12:30, we were requested to return to the area near the scene. Some volunteer searchers had discovered in some area a forested area with some disturbed soil. They were thinking this could be a potential burial site, so we proceeded to that location. It's just west of the salvage yard at the end of Kuss Road. What did you find when you arrived at that location? We were taken out into the woods a little bit and was indeed an area with disturbed soil. To me, it didn't look like a gravesite. It looked more like a rotten stump to me, where the wood had just turned into like humus. There were no plants growing up through it really, so it was a barren spot. So it kind of looked like it was disturbed. The normal grasses and moss and stuff growing in the area around it weren't here, so it did look odd. There was some whitish coloured plastic sticking up out of the ground in sort of a perimeter, maybe 3 feet in diameter. The plastic to me looked like it was decomposing, getting brittle and just flaking off on the ground on its own. Those little flakes were still there right under the plastic. What does that signify with respect to the age of that plastic and that particular site? Well, the fact that little bits were directly below the plastic that was sticking out of the ground indicated to me that it hadn't been disturbed recently and that that plastic had been there for quite some time. Perhaps years? Perhaps. So your conclusion with respect to the possibility of any type of burial site was what? Well, At that point, I was also informed that they had been working a bloodhound with a scent from Attorney Buting. Objection as to hearsay at this point, Attorney Fallon. That's fine. Mr. Erdl, just in terms of based on all the knowledge you had available to you, and in particular your examination of this location, what did you conclude regarding the possibility or no possibility of a burial site? My preliminary indication was that this was not a burial site. Approximately how long did your examination of that particular site take? Well, the first thing, they wanted to get permission from whoever owned that property. They needed to figure out who owned that property. They got written permission from that person. Guang and I then went in and photographed the area. We sent Chuck back then to the salvage yard to do the latent fingerprint processing on the two vehicles from the night before. This is about 3 in the afternoon, so it was dry. Wasn't raining at that point, so we sent him out to do that. Now this is interesting because Tyson, Lenk at Colburn at about 10:58 in the morning went to the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. They then returned back to the Yunder residence at about 2:50 p.m. So what were they doing at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac for nearly 3 hours prior to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab showing up? And as you've just heard from John Erdl, they had to wait because they had to get permission from the property owner. A warrant was then obtained for the burial area to search that. And then I began to excavate this humus-like material, moving it onto a tarp, digging down. I dug down a little ways and the white plastic perimeter was actually underneath all of that humus material. On the flip side of the white plastic was the label peat moss. It was an old bale of peat moss. Under that plastic was the remnants of an old wooden pallet that was decomposing into the soil. I picked the pieces of wood out, dug down into the soil a little bit and ran into roots. Fine root mat from the surrounding plants was well under the entire peat bag. And where there were little slits, small perforations in the peat bag, there were little shoots starting to come up through it. So again, indicating to me that this area had not recently been disturbed. I then dug down past the roots and looked at the soil layering. It looked like it, again, had not been disturbed, but at that point, I concluded this was not a burial site. When you finished the examination of that particular area, did you still have daylight or was it dark? No, it was about 4 or 5:45 and it was dark at that point. So let's sum this up. According to John Erdl, the 3-foot by 3-foot area of disturbed earth that was likely discovered by Michael Bushman was an old bale of peat moss and the remnants of an old wooden pallet that was decomposing. It took approximately 6 hours and multiple people and resources to reach this conclusion. In John Erdl's report, he wrote the following statement: a potential burial site of interest to both a cadaver dog and a bloodhound located in the woods south of the end of Kuss Road, west of the scene, was photographed and examined. Nothing was recovered from this site. The following was obtained from John Erdl's personal notes. Note the times on the left-hand side. I quote, "Continued with the second barrel until it was requested that we return to the scene to examine a potential burial site located by volunteer searchers as disturbed soil on a direct path from Stephen's residence, taken by a bloodhound following the scent from Teresa's shoe insole and of interest to a cadaver dog. At 1:40, we returned to the scene and were briefed by Investigator Wiegert and then escorted to the apparent burial site, not far into the brush, south at the end of Kuss Road, approximately half a mile to the west of Stephen's residence. The site was observed, and upon written consent from the property owner, photographs were taken and the site was examined. White plastic sheeting protruded from the ground on either side of an area approximately 3 foot in diameter, devoid of plants, apparent decomposed wood or peat-like material. Some moss lay nearby, uprooted. However, there was no sign that soil had been excavated and replaced, and numerous small bits of the plastic sheeting appeared to have shed from the exposed material and lay on the surface. Once a warrant was obtained, the site was excavated. The area devoid of plants appeared to be peat moss, and the plastic sheet, the remnants of a peat moss bag, as per the label on the underside. Beneath the bag was the decomposing remains of a wooden pallet. The surrounding root mat extended under and up through the plastic sheet. The area was excavated further and no disturbance to the soil layering was evident. Finished 5:45 p.m. So did John Erdl arrive at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac much earlier than anticipated, because in his notes he put 1:40 p.m. What did Sergeant Andrew Colburn do at the potential burial site? Question: were you asked to do anything else on the 7th, Sergeant? I believe I was also. At some point, apparently the command post received word that some searchers had located an area that it looked suspicious. There was plastic poking up from the ground and it looked like the ground had been disturbed. So I was asked to go to that area along with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, Sergeant Tyson and Lieutenant Link, and help the crime lab if they requested it, to excavate that area. Do you know on what roadway this was? I believe it was off Kuss White Cedar Road. This is something that Mr. Erdl yesterday talked about, a potential burial site, but wasn't. Was that your understanding, that it turned out not to be? Yes, it turned out to be nothing. Now remember, Sergeant Andrew Colburn had spent nearly 4 hours at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac with Lenk and Tyson. What did Lieutenant James Lenk do at the potential burial site? Question: thereafter, were you asked to do something else? I'm sure I don't recall right now. All right, nothing that sticks out in your mind, at least nothing of a substantial evidentiary nature. Is that right? That's correct. The next day then, on Tuesday the 8th, Lieutenant Link, did you once again return to the Avery salvage property? Yes, sir, I did. Apparently, Lieutenant James Link must have forgotten that he had spent nearly 4 hours at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac with both Colburn and Tyson. What did Sergeant William Tyson do at the potential burial site? Question: Lieutenant Link and Colburn, I'm sorry, did you say that they were both with you? I believe all three of us were together. Did they leave your location at all at that time? No. And then you left? Yes, went back to, I believe, Bob Yonder's to finish with the firearms. I'm going to hurry just a little bit with you, Sergeant Tyson, so that we can get through at least your direct testimony for the day. Let me just move forward to the 8th of November. That would be on a Tuesday. Were you on site at all that day? Sergeant William Tyson had also forgotten that he had spent over 4 hours at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Remember, he was meant to be supervising both Colburn and Lenk. This is a draft and unsigned search warrant. I want to give credit to Sunshine Christina, who had obtained this document via FOIA. Search warrant. To the sheriff or any constable or any peace officer of said county. Whereas Detective Mark Wiegert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, being duly sworn, has this day complained in writing to the said court evidence located during a search on November the 7th, 2005 at the following GPS coordinates, located on the property of Todd and Carrie Vanderwarf in the town of Gibson, County of Manitowoc, State of Wisconsin. Evidence more particularly described as follows. The property is located directly to the east of the Todd and Carrie Vanderwarf residence, located at 4183 Kuss Road, Two Rivers, Town of Gibson, County of Manitowoc, State of Wisconsin, and more particularly described as a marshy area containing cedar and other trees. The coordinates pertaining to an area of disturbed earth at the following GPS coordinates. There are now located and concealed certain things, to wit: 1. Women's clothing, including but not limited to blue jeans, a white button-down shirt, and a spring jacket. 2. The body of Teresa Marie Horbach, date of birth 03/22/1980, described as a white female, sandy blonde hair, 5 foot 6 inches, approximately 135 pounds. 3. Property belonging to Teresa Horbach, including but not limited to cameras, film and photography equipment, electronic storage devices, and a cellular telephone. 4. Forensic evidence, including but not limited to fiber evidence, blood, hair, saliva, semen, palm prints, and fingerprints. 5. Instrumentalities capable of taking a human life, including but not limited to weapons, firearms, ammunition, knives, cutting instruments, ropes, and ligatures. 6. Blunt objects and other tools, including but not limited to crowbars, tire irons, and shovels. 7. Objects utilized to wrap or encase a body or object, including but not limited to plastic bags, tarps, boxes. 8. Any other items which officers identify as being related to the investigation of the disappearance or homicide of Teresa M. Horbach, date of birth 03/22/1980, which things may constitute evidence of crimes committed, including but not limited to violations of the following sections, and prays that a search warrant be issued. Now, therefore, in the name of the state of Wisconsin, you are commanded forthwith to search the evidence for said things, and if the same or any portion thereof are found, to safely keep said material so long as necessary for the purpose of being produced as evidence on any trial or until further order of the court, dated 7th day of November 2005. Now remember, Stephen Avery wasn't even arrested yet. And now we come for the affidavit for search warrant. Again, this was not signed, and I want to give credit for Sunshine Christina, who'd obtained this document via FOIA. I'm not going to read out all the contents of this affidavit. Point number 11. And in this point, I'll read out the following. It was very, very controversial. I quote, "There was also a blunt instrument upon which blood was found, located in the rear of the vehicle." Point number 12. Your affiant is informed that a grid search was performed by volunteers in an attempt to locate Teresa Hobart and evidence pertaining to her disappearance. Volunteer searcher Mike Bushman was assigned as leader of Team A, working north and northeast from a conveyor belt in a gravel pit area immediately southwest of Avery Auto Salvage Compound. Searchers were spaced 20 feet apart and contained a group of 12. A volunteer searcher in the group informed Bushman that he observed a disturbed area of earth. The disturbed area was located on the Todd and Kari Vanderwarf property, located on Kuss Road in the town of Gibson, County of Manitowoc, State of Wisconsin. So, we know that the disturbed area of earth was on the property of Todd and Kari Vanderwarf. They were interviewed at 4 p.m. Foul Play has the unredacted DCI report that Search Team A had discovered the disturbed earth in the morning on private property. Here is the unredacted DCI report, and I'm only going to read the pertinent parts of this report. On 11/07/2005, at approximately 4 p.m., Heimel and Seiler conducted an interview of 5 members of the Vanderwarf family. At the time of this interview, an extensive evidence search was occurring on property owned by the Vanderwarfs at the end of the cul-de-sac of Kuss Road. They stated that they do own property to include a wooded area to the east of their residence, with this property including approximately 5 acres. They stated that they own the property from their residence to the east along the south side of Kuss Road to the end of Kuss Road, where a dirt 2-track travels along a large dirt berm, and with this dirt track leading back to the Redont property. The Vanderwarfs stated that normally during weekdays, nobody is at home at their residence, as both parents are working and the children are in school. The Vanderwarfs stated that they did not observe anything out of the ordinary. The Vanderwarfs stated that they did not see that female or her vehicle in the area. Kari Vanderwarf stated that on a nearly daily basis in the afternoon hours after work, she will take the family dog for a walk through the wooded area on their property, to include a small meadow area at the end of Kuss Road, where the search was presently taking place. Kari Vanderwarf stated that she has not observed anything unusual in the past in that area. The Vanderwarfs provided no further information. A consent to search form was signed at 3:24 p.m. However, when were the searches from Team A on Vanderwarf's private property? What about Investigator Fassbender and Investigator Uyghur? What about Trooper Reese? We know he was taking photographs from 8:30 a.m. What about Investigator Diedring? We know he was down there at 10:45 a.m. And of course, what about Tyson, Lenk and Colburn, who arrived there just after 10:58 a.m. and then were called back at 3:08 p.m.? What about members of the Wisconsin State Crime Lab? And what about the canine dog handlers? This sounded like a potential legal nightmare to sort out. Point number 13. Your affiant is informed that dog handler Julie Kramer from Great Lake Canine utilized a cadaver dog in the search. Kramer utilized a trained cadaver dog near the area of disturbed earth located by Bushman. The trained cadaver dog hit on the area of disturbed earth, indicating that a body or blood had been present in that area. Point number 14. Your affiant is informed that Investigator Diedring identified the area of disturbed earth as having the following GPS coordinates, which is located on the property of Todd and Kari Vanderwarf in the town of Gibson, County of Manitowoc, State of Wisconsin. Point number 15. Your affiant is informed that Sarah Fausk of the Kukana Police Department, accompanied by her canine unit, Loof, assisted in the search. Loof is a scent-trailing bloodhound who has proven to be reliable in the past. Loof was provided with the scent of Teresa Horbach near the residence of Stephen Avery. Loof detected a scent near the residence of Stephen Avery and followed it along a wood line that led in an east-west direction to Kuss Road. Loof led Sarah Fausk up to the crime scene tape, which was located in a perimeter around the area of disturbed earth. The crime scene tape was approximately 40 yards from the area of disturbed earth. Point number 16. Your affiant is informed by Investigator John Diedring of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department that the excavation site is approximately 3 feet by 4 feet in area. The area of disturbed earth is lightly covered by pine needles, while the surrounding area is densely covered with leaves and pine needles. Investigator Diedring observed Bushman insert a flag into the area of disturbed earth. The flag went in with little resistance. Investigator Diedring then observed Bushman insert a flag in the area adjacent to the disturbed earth and noted that it went in with substantially greater resistance. Investigator Diedring also located a piece of nylon rope wedged between a log and a tree approximately 20 yards south of the disturbed earth. Investigator Diedring noted that there was a small section of white plastic sheet material protruding from ground at the area of disturbed earth. Investigator Diedring noted that there is a trail running in a north-south direction near the area of disturbed earth. On the trail, Investigator Diedring located a piece of blue tarp approximately 3 inches by 3 inches square. Your affiant believes that based upon his training and experience, the section of blue tarp and the piece of white plastic sheeting would be consistent with materials commonly associated with covering and concealing buried objects. Was Investigator Wiegert describing this specific location in the affidavit? Point number 17. Your affiant believes, based upon the information provided in this affidavit and based upon your affiant's training and experience, that the items listed on the face sheet of the search warrant are likely to be found in the area of disturbed earth. Your affiant states that there is probable cause to believe that Teresa Hallbach has been the victim of a crime, including, but not limited to, homicide, sexual assault, and false imprisonment. Respectfully submitted this 7th day of November 2005, Detective Mark Wiegert. What did the HRD canines alert at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac? This is from Julie Kramer's report and looking at the activities of Canine Brutus and Canine Trace. We then proceeded to a location we were requested to check on Kuss Road, where a potential burial site had been located. Upon arrival there, Canine Brutus checked the area, and after passing the area upon entry in the wooded area, he gave a head check, returning to the location and gave his bark alert, alert number 12, and seemed to be particularly interested in a shovel lying next to the disturbed earth. We were cleared from that location, but returned a short time later to recheck the area. The shovel had been removed and was to be checked separately. Neither dog showed any interest on the shovel. Canine Trace checked the wooded area first and did not alert, but did show interest, increased animation, and high head checks. Upon returning to the area a second time, Canine Brutus again barked and alerted near the area of disturbed earth. Both Brutus and Trace detect human decomposition. That is, they detect specific volatile organic compounds and are not specific for Teresa Hallbach. When human decomposition occurs, greater than 400 volatile compounds are produced. In death, we all smell the same. HRD canines are trained not to just detect the smell of methane gas, which can occur. They are trained very carefully on a cocktail of volatile compounds. Loof is a live scent canine. I'm only going to focus on one particular track that Loof did on the 7th of November. I quote, "Reporting Officer Fausk and Bloodhound Loof arrived at the Calumet County Command Post to be briefed on the situation and to see what we as a canine team could assist them with. I'd previously requested scent items of Teresa Hallbach's, preferably shoes. Sheriff Pagel did have 2 pairs of shoes that belonged to Teresa Hallbach. Both were bagged separately in plastic bags. I placed sterile gauze in the toes of all the shoes and removed the insole from a black pair of heeled shoes. The toe area was cut off and placed in a plastic bag with sterile gauze. The shoes were then secured in my personal vehicle. After being spoken to by Sheriff Pagel, Deputy Sipple, Deputy Bowie, and DCI agents, I explained my planned areas of running tracks. My 2 areas of interest were where the vehicle was located on the south end of the property, and the other being from the area that Teresa was last seen taking photographs of the van by the trailer of Stephen Avery. Deputy Rick Riemer of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department was assigned to assist me on the tracks. I want to look at track 3, which commenced at 1:30 p.m. This was the track from van for sale by Avery property. I quote, "We walked down the driveway to the Avery property to the area where the van was sitting and for sale. I pre-scented Canine Loof and did a perimeter scent inventory. Canine Loof was harnessed, given the scent article of the insole and given the command of find. Having started approximately 50 feet east of the van, Canine Loof immediately went to the front portion of the van for sale. Canine Loof continued west, going to a black F350 parked in the driveway in front of a garage. Canine Loof went to both doors of the truck. Canine Loof then went directly to the service door of the garage and worked her nose along the bottom of the actual overhead garage door, showing much interest. Canine Loof worked west around the side of the garage, but was unable to continue due to a large, aggressive appearing German Shepherd. Canine Loof wanted to continue around the garage. Canine Loof went up to the south door of the trailer home, the door having a small porch entrance, and the door was white in colour. Canine Loof wanted to enter the home. Canine Loof continued north along the trailer and went between some pine trees and a burning barrel. Canine Loof smelled a charred area, showing some interest, then continued west. Canine Loof went west in a picked cornfield. Directly to the south was a gravel pit, and in between the two was an area of brush and trees. Canine Loof worked this area with indications of very strong scent. Canine Loof worked west, coming out to a cul-de-sac that was taped off with crime scene tape, and two deputies were not allowing access. Canine Loof crossed the tape on one occasion and then was told to not go any further. The deputies phoned Sheriff Pagel to see if I could continue, but were told not allow anyone access at this time. Canine Loof was unharnessed and we waited for further instructions. Canine Loof worked consistently as she does while working strong scent. Witnessed by Deputy Rick Reamer. And here is the CASO report by Deputy Rick Reamer, and I quote, "It was indicated by Fausk that Loof was very intense on this track." And you can see here track 3 that was taken by Loof. You can see the start location and the finish point or the exit point at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. A lot has been made about the position or locations that Loof went to. You can see on the diagram on the left-hand side that Loof, once she was scented with Teresa's life scent from a shoe, Loof went up to the van. This is the van that Teresa Horbach had photographed for the photo shoot. Loof then went up to the F350 and also then went along the garage door and then went to the concrete stoop. There's been arguments that I've seen that suggested that Loof was following Teresa's life scent. The implication being that since Loof took this particular pathway, it had meant that Teresa Horbach had indeed gotten inside Stephen Avery's trailer. I do believe that Loof was tracking Teresa's life scent. After extensive forensic examination of Stephen Avery's trailer, no evidence that Teresa Horbach ever stepped foot inside Stephen Avery's trailer. We know that Stephen was given an Auto Trader magazine by Teresa Horbach. Stephen Avery had placed that Auto Trader magazine inside his trailer and he left it on the computer desk. And that Auto Trader magazine was confiscated by law enforcement officers. Paper is an excellent live scent article because of the porosity of the paper. If you are handling that paper, and there is no question that Teresa Horbach would have been handling the Auto Trader magazine, she would have left skin cells, oils, and other live scent molecules all over the Auto Trader magazine. Since Teresa Halbach had handed the Auto Trader magazine to Stephen Avery, and Stephen Avery had walked back to his property and left it inside his trailer, there is a very high chance that what Loof was in actual fact following was not Teresa Halbach herself, but in actual fact the Auto Trader magazine. And it makes sense because, remember, according to Stephen Avery, he had encountered Teresa Halbach at the van. And at the van, this is where the transaction occurred. Stephen Avery had paid Teresa Halbach, and Teresa Halbach had handed Stephen Avery a copy of the Auto Trader magazine. And it makes sense that Stephen would have walked back along this path back to his home. So it is highly possible that Loof indeed was following the life scent of Teresa, but not following Teresa herself, but the Auto Trader magazine. I'm also very confident that had Loof been allowed to go inside Stephen Avery's trailer, Loof would have tracked to where the Auto Trader magazine had been placed. We know that Brutus, who is a cadaver dog that detects human decomposition, went inside Stephen Avery's trailer. Brutus did not give any alerts in Stephen Avery's master bedroom. Brutus had given an alert inside the bathroom laundry area, and there is forensic evidence of blood that was shed on the floor of the bathroom, and that's when Stephen Avery had cut himself. What Loof did next was extremely interesting. Let's examine this. After leaving Stephen Avery's trailer area, Loof went down the cornfield, and there was an area or areas of very strong scent, and ended up at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac and was stopped at the crime scene tape. Pagel had prevented Loof from going any further. The state are presenting that nothing of interest was found at the Kuss Road burial site. It has been suggested that when Teresa was cremated in Stephen Avery's burn pit, presumably on the evening of October the 31st, 2005, that her ashes somehow had carried from Stephen Avery's burn pit right across the cornfield and ended up towards Kuss Road and also in the ponds that you see in Redon's quarry. We know the wind conditions for the evening of October the 31st. The wind, in actual fact, was blowing in the opposite direction to the area that Loof had showed strong interest and strong scent. The other factor that needs to be considered is just because Loof had started close to where Stephen Avery's trailer was and ended up at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac, it did not imply that material from the Kuss Road cul-de-sac was taken from that location and brought to Stephen Avery's trailer. There are many factors that you need to consider when trying to interpret the tracks taken by Loof. No scent source was found by Loof. There are many different factors involved when a dog is tracking a human scent. You've got to take into account the stability, the dissipation, how the material was collected, the possibility of contamination, how it was stored, how the dog was trained, the handler's experience, the terrain, etc., etc. Fausk herself was not called up to testify in either of the trials. So let's summarize the main points of this presentation. So according to the state, nothing of forensic value was found at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. According to John Ertl, he had unearthed a peat moss bag and a rotting wooden pallet. we don't have any photographs demonstrating this. According to Sergeant Colburn, it turned out to be nothing, although he had spent approximately 4 hours at Kuss Road. Both a HRD canines and a bloodhound had alerted at the disturbed earth. What is the significance of this? Investigator Fassbender, Mr. Kratz, and Fallon had mentioned bones being found at the clandestine burial site. And remember, it was actually Fassbender who had first mentioned this. Mr. Wiegert had obtained a permission to search form well after searches had already been on the private property of the Vanderwarfs. Did this represent a legal nightmare to have been sorted out? All in all, more than 6 hours with a lot of searches and resources were spent at a 3 foot by 3 foot piece of dirt. We are still yet to see a report from retired investigator Mike Bushman about his activities. My name is Dr. Silkman and I'm from the Foul Play team. I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation. Please let me know your thoughts about what transpired at the Kuss Road cul-de-sac. Thank you.